Where did I put that? Ah! Oh, that's smart. Oh, hey there, camera. I didn't just spend the past 35 minutes setting up to get this shot. A question I get quite often on our videos is, how do you achieve your flicker effects throughout your display? Are you using controllers? If so, what controllers are you using? Are you using certain bulbs? If so, what bulbs are you using? I figured I get asked the question enough that it would be the perfect topic for a video. And I could go on and on about this stuff for hours, so I'll try and keep it as short as possible. I pulled out all the little bits and pieces that I use in our display to achieve all the different flicker effects. And hopefully you guys will find this video useful if you're on the fence or trying to make a decision about adding something like this into your display. So let's check everything out. Hey y'all, what's up? It's Kellen with K&T Do Halloween. I hope everybody is doing well. I have a flicker video for you. As you can see on the table and from the intro, I have some flicker controllers as well as flicker light fixtures and flicker bulbs, and I want to show you guys what we use in our display, where we use it, why we use it, and hopefully that'll answer some questions that I get asked pretty often, as well as help you guys decide if these are products that you'd like to try in your displays at home. First, I want to start with flicker bulbs. I think that's a much shorter discussion and explanation than the flicker controllers. They're pretty self-explanatory, and I really don't swap up much how I use them or what I use them for. Let's start with the single LED flicker node that has a built-in flicker sequence into the base of the LED. These work wonderfully for candles. If you want a more dynamic candle or a larger candle effect, you can bundle these up in groups of 2 or 3. They often come packaged like this. I purchased mine from a company called Lighthouse LEDs, and it looks like I buy them in packs of 10. They come in many different colors. Typically for candles, what I like to purchase is the amber, or this one that I have here, which is the yellow color. Works really well for candles. Now I'm going to plug it in so you guys can see this. This is a really wonderful effect. It has a great flicker to it. It definitely mimics candles. This is what I use in all of my resin poured candles throughout our display. The only challenge I find with these is you have a large cluster, say of 15 to 20 candles. Sometimes the candles can sync up with their flicker sequences, and there's one thing that I've learned in lighting is the human eye is almost trained from birth to recognize pairs, patterns, and groups. Now when these are grouped together and they are all running the same flicker sequence, it's very easy to see some of them sync up. I don't think it's a major problem, but it's definitely something to think about with these if you're trying to use them in a large volume and power them up at the same time. But these are absolutely wonderful. I think for the pack of 10 with the flicker controller wired into the base, they run around $15, which is not bad, about $1 when it comes with the wires on them. What I typically do is I don't use these solder ports. I actually solder the barrel connection, the 2.1 millimeter to 5.5 millimeter barrel connection onto the end. That way I don't have to deal with these screw terminals that you can see going on here. But these are great, absolutely great for candles, LED eyeballs, things like that. These I think work perfectly. Moving on from there, the next in the LED bulb range would be the new technology that they have with these flickering LEDs that chase upwards to create a simulated flame effect. This one that I have here is a 5 watt. We use these in our garage lights and things like that, but anywhere I have a pumpkin, I'm usually using this style of light, but with the mini candelabra base on it. This is obviously a standard Edison base, but they come in all different base sizes. I retrofit every single pumpkin to use this style of LED because I just love how punchy it is, and I love the fiery flickering effect that it creates. Another thing that I do to these, and more and more they've been coming with black bases, but I typically go around with some spray paint and just feather an edge onto the bottom so it isn't such a cut and hard line. You can take this fading with the black spray paint as low as you'd like, but in my opinion, it helps mask the fact that this is an LED effect. But something like this, we use this in all of our standard house fixtures on the front of our house, as well as in every single pumpkin we have in our display. It produces a really bright and punchy flicker effect. Another great thing about this product is it has a sensor in it, and it actually can tell the orientation of the bulb, whether it's upside down or right side up. That actually changes where the flicker comes from. So if it's hung upside down, the fire comes from the base, like a standard gas lamp, and when it's flipped up, it works like a torch, which I think is really wonderful. So pumpkins, standard house fixtures, you just can't beat this effect. You could buy adapters if you need to, but they sell these in candelabra base, they sell them in the mini candle base, they sell them, you know, every base under the sun, they now have something like this. So I'll make sure I put the links for these guys below. Now, the last thing with bulbs I want to show you is the lanterns that you saw at the beginning. Now, with the red lantern, this was something that I purchased and constructed myself. This is just a very cheap lantern. I apologize for the hand hanging off of it. This is the lantern from our Watchman, our zombie Watchman from our display. But this is something that I purchased, I think for the lantern, I don't know, I paid maybe $8 or something like that for it, which is probably more expensive than I needed to pay. But I like the color and it was convenient and easy. What I did was I spray painted the glass shield that's in here. I can probably take this guy apart. I spray painted the shield with a frost effect, and that's what helped mask the LED that's inside. Now you can see I have wires coming out of the top of it because that's how I pre-wired my LED to function in this lantern. Now I'm going to hold it up so you guys can see inside. But this light actually is the same as the bulb that I showed you previously. It actually has several LED nodes on it, and it has a two-prong base, and it flickers upward to create that flame effect. Effect like this really requires heavy, heavy, heavy diffusion, in my opinion, because it's really easy for the human eye to recognize those clusters of LED. Now, I really like this effect. It isn't a really realistic kerosene lantern effect, in my opinion, because from my experience with kerosene lanterns, they tend to have a much steadier, and it's not really a candle flicker that's coming from the light source. It tends to pulse more, which I'll show you with the second lantern that I have. But this really boils down to a preference. I prefer this effect where it chases upwards in my lanterns. It just looks more like fire to the human eye and they don't question it. But if I was doing a stage production, this probably, one, wouldn't show up very well on stage at a distance, and two, it's not going to emulate the realistic look of a kerosene lantern that most designers are going to be going for. But I love it. You can see I poked a hole in the bottom, so I basically could wire my 2.5 to 5.5 millimeter connection, because I hate batteries, and ran the wire up through the top, out through the hand, and that's our Watchman lantern. This lantern over here is more of a professional grade lantern, I would call it. It's a higher end prop. It has a high-end dimming flicker controller inside, as well as what they call a stage realistic light source for a kerosene lantern. I just plug this guy in, and you definitely holding them side by side can see the difference. This one, the red one, looks much more like flames coming up from the source, whereas the more expensive professional grade prop has more of a pulsing flicker, and you also see that this one has a warmer, lighter light source as opposed to the red lantern, which has more of a orange or flame colored light source. Now, this is a product that is actually built and used for stage productions. It is battery operated, and it also can run off power if necessary, but it's a full scale lantern specifically for stage use. Now the great thing about this one is it actually has a dimmer switch on the bottom, so you can turn the light source way down, or you can also have the actor turn up the light source while on stage. It has a much more realistic lantern flicker. I wouldn't even call it a flicker, I would call it more of a pulse in my opinion. But this color is much brighter and reads lantern when it's on stage. If you have a production or your yard haunt where maybe you use much dimmer fixtures or things like that, this may not be the best option for you. They're also very expensive because they're obviously intended for professional productions, movie productions, and things like that. But I wanted to show you the comparison of the light sources because this has a flicker controller built into it as well as a dimming capability, which is crucial when you're doing things like film so you don't blow out the camera, which I'm sure I'm doing right now with this. But you can see down here that the dimmer is on the bottom and it works just like a standard, kerosene lantern would, minus the fact that it's safe, and if it drops it's not going to start a fire on stage. Now that we got flicker bulbs out of the way, we can move on to flicker fixtures and then flicker controllers. Flicker fixtures are going to be light fixtures that have the flicker effect already built into them. Sometimes you can change the colors of the effect, sometimes you can't, but this is kind of going to go over all of those fixtures. Now in our display, when I'm not using a DMX fixture, so a fixture that can be controlled by a professional lighting signal or a protocol that we use in our sequencer, I'm using the ColorPiano fixture that I believe you can purchase from Fright Props, and I'm almost fairly certain that Gantom/Darklight is the creators of this product. What I love about it is that you can really connect it to a smartphone, and via the app you can control it to have an ambient or a triggered show. I think it's up to 10 minutes on the ambient show, 2 minutes on the triggered show, but you can make this light do almost anything. It's 3 watts, it has RGB capabilities, meaning you can use red, green, blue, or any of the colors in between, and access it via the app to create a really wonderful flicker effect. You also can create a pulse effect or a strobe effect, and you can change the intensity as well as the speed of the flicker or strobe or pulse effect, which I think is really neat. You can make it change colors. These are a little bit more expensive. Sometimes you can find them on sale, but for the most part, they'll retail for about $39 or $49.99, and I purchased these from Fright Props. If you want to get a more in-depth explanation about the ColorPiano, go ahead and check out my old video that I'll link below where I did a much more in-depth review on why I loved this fixture. Now the reason I'm bringing this fixture up is because you also can use it to produce a flicker effect. It is one that is wired into the actual controller and it is adjustable, but I wanted to show you it. Now I'm going to bring out this handy dandy white prop here so you guys can actually see the lighting effect on it. But this is the flicker effect with the ColorPiano light in green. I really love using flickering light fixtures and light sources to add movement to static props. It's something that really can just take that amazing prop up over the edge by simply adding a flickering colored light. I also wanted to show again that you can do this flickering effect in any color to really add some dynamic movement. You can see that this flicker box actually has some sequencing set into it, and it just turned off and swapped from green to the amber candlelight color and candlelight effect. And this is a really beautiful room effect if you have a grouping of candles on an organ or something like that, to be able to light up that scene from above and do what I call enhance the candle effect. Because there's no way that a candle is providing that much light in the room, but we fudge it on stage as well as in our haunts by additional supplemental lighting to really enhance the effect. And I love these fixtures. We actually have them in our backyard on some of our fountains. They're workhorses, and the fact that I can go in and change the sequencing and reprogram it to any color, I think it's just spectacular, but they're expensive. Here it's doing a surge effect in blue. This is actually simulating electrical surges, and this is another great feature of this light. And last but not least, my favorite, the flicker controller. We use these all throughout our display, and the main reason is in the name. Control. I love the ability that I can completely control these effects from speed to what kind of effect is coming out of the controller. Now, I was first turned on to these many years ago when I was working in theater as a technician and a designer in New York. Anywhere where it was logistically impossible to have a fire effect on stage, typically we're turning to these small flicker controllers to build into props and scenery to help emulate that fire effect. Side note, having fire on stage is a complete logistical nightmare. Having done it many times, there are so many precautions and safety measures you have to take, and it's just unpredictable. You don't know if the candle's going to go out. You don't know if the actress is going to trip over her costume or his costume and have a problem. You have to have water everywhere, and to be honest, and having been there, it is a complete logistical nightmare, which is why so many professional productions turn to these types of controllers. You can see from these controllers, and I hope that it is actually focusing and that you can actually see, there are buttons. So there's a mode button, there's a speed button, and there is also a light button. The mode button changes between all the different dynamic settings. The speed button is fairly self-explanatory, but that actually adjusts the speed up and down of the effect that you've chosen. And the light button on the bottom actually adjusts the brightness or dimness of the effect in the dimmer setting. So each of these controllers has those buttons. The main difference between the yellow and the red controllers is the speed. The yellow controller has faster dynamic flicker effects than the red controller. The red controller has much slower flicker effects for creating things like slower burning embers. It's just the speed difference between the two controllers. Another great thing about these controllers is they have the male and female 2.5 millimeter to 5.5 millimeter connection. That means any LED or any low voltage light source that you plug into these controllers will operate. So you can operate things like the small spotlight LEDs that I've shown in my videos, or you can operate the larger clusters of LEDs if you're trying to create something like burning coals. Another great thing about these controllers is since it runs off of the 2.1 to 5.5 millimeter barrel connection, you can actually run these things off of batteries if you're trying to incorporate into a costume or prop that maybe doesn't have easy access to power. However, if you live in my household, looking for batteries goes something like this. Hey babe, where are the batteries? In the junk drawer. Are you sure? I'll just have to do this the hard way. Got it. And that's why in my display, I have the mentality of no more props with batteries! But it is a great option to be able to have the battery operated function if you need it. I'm just not a super fan. Another reason I love these is the 2.1 to 5.5 millimeter barrel connections. You can use things like splitters and actually power multiple effects. I think we've gone up to like 30 or 45 that have been teed off of this. You can also use these splitters to go off of the male connection to actually have multiple lights flickering at once off of one controller, so that's also really nice. And then I'm going to go ahead and plug my amber spot LED into the red controller and my yellow LED into the yellow controller. And I'm gonna go ahead and shut my light off so you guys can actually see these effects a bit better. And then I'll go ahead and throw this paper towel over the top That way, hopefully, it's a little bit more visible on camera. Now, I'm going to go ahead and throw up on screen now the picture of all the different dynamic flicker settings on the screen per the manufacturer. Now, hopefully you can see these under the paper towel, but what I have them set to right now is the dynamic dimming setting. You have the ability to dim them statically from 10 all the way up to 90%. So to access that, you just hit the light button, you'll see the flicker feature turns off, and then you can use the speed button, and that actually will turn up the intensity for static dimming. I think these are a bit overkill to use these for static dimming features, but it's a nice feature if you're looking for it nonetheless. It also is very helpful if you're trying to focus these lights on certain props to not have the flickering effect to see really where the beam is going. And I'll go ahead and I'll use the speed setting to actually dim the amber LED as well. You can see that goes all the way back down. Now I'm going to go into the dynamic settings. I'm going to be working with the amber LED on top. The first setting, this is going to be candle flicker brighter. You can see that it's a very fast-paced flicker because this is the faster controller, but you can also use the mode settings or the speed settings to actually slow the flame down or speed it up. I believe each dynamic flicker effect has 10 speed settings ranging from 1, which is fast, to 10, which is very slow or an ember-like burn, which you're kind of seeing here. And then I'll go into setting 2. This is a candle flame dimmer. Setting 3 is going to be a soft candle flame, so not much flicker to it, but a dimmer intensity. 4 is going to be an average fire of flame, so you'll see the lows of this effect much lower than a candle effect. 3, 2, 1. 4 is the average fire effect. You'll see in this effect, 3, 2, 1. 4 is the average fire flame effect. You will see that this effect has much deeper lows and less. 3, 2, 1. Three, two, one. You'll see 4 is the average fire flame effect. This has much less flickering to it. It has some peaks, but it's a much lower intensity and slower flicker. We'll go to 5. 5 is going to be a moderate fire effect. You're going to see that this, again, will not flicker as much as a candle. It will have much more gapped out highs and lows, but this is great for creating coals. You also can speed this effect up and slow it down within the controller. Now 6 is going to be rough flame effect. Typically what I find with this effect is it has moments of bright, punchy flares, but most of it revolves around a slow burning ember effect trying to emulate the fire. And then if you push it one more time, it'll go into the static or the dimming section. Now moving to the red controller, which is the darker amber, or darker orange LED below, you can see the first setting. This is going to be the flicker medium to low. You can see that a lot of these effects that are on the red controller, because it's slower, it doesn't have much speed to the flicker. This is setting 2, which is going to be the medium to high flame. 3 is going to be flicker low. 4 is going to be flicker high, so a faster paced flickering with higher punches of brights. You need to do this one again. Now moving on to the red slower flicker controller. The first setting we have is a flicker medium to low. This is going to be a dimmer setting and a slower flicker setting. The second one we have is going to be flicker medium to high. So this is going to flicker a bit faster as well as have some more brighter moments. You can also adjust the speed with these higher or lower using the speed setting. Third is going to be flicker low. This just means it's going to have a candle flicker effect, but it's going to stay in a dimmer range. 4 is going to be flicker high. Again, it means you have a candle flicker effect and it's going to live in the higher part of the brightness range versus lower. 5 is going to be surge fire, similar to the amber, except all of these effects I find are much slower. I love this effect right here for embers and coals. I'll typically use 2 or 3 of these controllers teeing off to several lights in an orange color to help simulate that ember effect. And 6 is going to be surge fire high. This is where you'll see large pulsing bright moments in the ember glowing effect trying to simulate a rough fire burning. And if you hit it one more time, you'll be into the static dimming function. I'm going to remove the orange LED that I have, the spotlight, and plug in one of my LED clusters. Now I'm sure this is probably going to blow out the camera because it is much brighter, but this is my favorite light to use for anything where I'm trying to simulate embers or coals or anything like that. Now when I'm creating flame effects, I always like to use this orange cluster as the base. I'm going to cycle it through a couple different functions just so you can see them side by side, and then I'm going to go ahead and put the paper towel over the top to help dim it out a bit so you can sort of see this other light. Now these ones overpower anything that I have on top of it, but they add a great base flicker effect, especially behind fog or anything like that. I have one of these in the base of my simulated flame urn, as well as 3 of these yellow LEDs pointed up around it to really catch the fog from below. But these cluster LEDs hooked up to a flicker controller would work beautifully for any sort of coals or embers or simulated low burning fire effect, or combine them together in multiples to create more dynamic effects in your display. Really awesome effects. I absolutely love these flicker controllers. I think now they retail, you can get 3 of them for about $29.99. It's about $10 a piece. Really not bad in the grand scheme of flicker controllers. And when you're trying to create a more dynamic effect, just be sure to use 3 or more flicker controllers. Well, that's my video on flicker bulbs and flicker controllers. I hope you guys enjoyed and got some information out of it. For those of you that have posted questions, I hope I answered as many of them as possible on how we use the flicker bulbs as well as the flicker controllers in our display to create all the various fire and flicker effects. Now, if you're interested in videos like this, please be sure to click the subscribe button. That'll let you know anytime that we post videos, as well as hit the like button right in the face. It lets me know that you guys appreciate what we're doing, as well as that you're interested in the content that we're producing. I really love these controllers. I really love pretty much anything that flickers in the Halloween world, so I could go on and on and on. But I hope this helped you guys get some information to see if you guys want to use these products in your displays at home. Now remember, if you create it, they will always come. Bye y'all.